So my name is Susanne from Ecologic Institute in Berlin, and I will talk about what can a policymaker make about marine litter. So we have a lot of EU legislation in place. Of course, there is the single and very new piece which is directly targeting marine litter. This is the MSFD, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And then we have also quite old directives already, which are linked to waste, land-based waste, and also freshwater litter, for instance. And they are also linked to our waste hierarchy. For instance, the packaging directive is directly linked to the highest stage of the hierarchy, the most important stage, the prevention stage. Still, we discovered a lot of gaps in this legal system, and we tried to outline first solutions. Additionally, we screened existing measures in all 4 sea regions, more than 100 measures, which are legislative, which is regulatory, like laws, but also audits, impact assessments, and on the other hand, we also targeted measures which are co-management measures, like cooperative measures, awareness-raising campaigns, etc. This was backed, this exercise, by 16 CleanSea stakeholder workshops in all 4 sea regions, and we gathered a lot of information, suggestions from experts of different sectors like fisheries, maritime sector, and also NGOs, administration, and research. One result of this exercise is the targeting of these existing planned measures of the product life cycle. So, what you can see is the answer of the different sea regions to the product life cycle. So there exist a lot of measures, and they are linked to the different stages of the product life cycle, like the design and production stage, the consumption and use stage, which is the light green stage. And so far, in the center, you see the ideal product life cycle, which we learned more about from Pedro already. So the green bar shows the most important stages for real circular economy, for a real product life cycle. So we have to really target actually the prevention side. Actually, if you have a quick look to the 4 graphs in the 4 regions, you see there's quite a lot of imbalance. There's no real picture of such an ideal product life cycle. Instead, and sometimes it's the opposite way around, that you have far more clean up measures than prevention measures. And additionally, we also assessed the planned program of measures of the member states and the regional action plans related to marine litter of the sea conventions, which is shown here in a dotted color. You see here, these are these planned measures. And still, there's a quite unbalanced picture. To be more general, you can draw conclusions about the main gaps. Of course, we have a quite fragmented legal system, and we are not really targeting marine litter within the legislation. Further, we have a quite insufficient focus on the first most important stages of the life cycle stage. That's, as said, the design production level and the consumption and use stage. So this is a main gap we observed during our studies. And of course, we also have a lack of proper implementation of laws, legislation, and a proper enforcement, which currently can be seen on thousands of infringements, for instance, of the Waste Framework Directive and the Landfill Directive. Last but not least, we have already quite nice legal principles in place. Hans mentioned the ecosystem approach. We have a polluter pays principle and also precautionary principle, but they are quite theoretical. They are always mentioned in lots of action plans, but they are not putting to life. They are not really implemented. Another important issue we want to stress here is that the impact of environmental legislation is more related to the design feature of an instrument than the type of an instrument. So in our view, we have key success factors for legislation related to marine litter, and some of them are here in the center, like coherence, predictability, and of course the possibility to monitor compliance and to observe non-compliance immediately. Also the strict enforcement supported by penalties and prosecution. And of course, then a good combination, a clever combination of different instruments, other instruments like economical instruments or voluntary instruments. What can a policymaker do now? We heard that we have a systemic problem. How to deal with this really underlying problem of behavior change, of ideas which are not really mentioned yet, degrowth, and so on. Transition was mentioned. So in CleanSea, we weren't really able to go to the real ground of the whole problem, but we tried to at least assess these hundreds of measures and provide some first packages and opportunities of measures to policymakers, which they can use then for their regional needs and adapt them within their geographical scope. So, for instance, the most important stage, the design and production stage, could be tackled by eco-design regulations. And also the ban of certain items in sensitive areas. The use and consumption can be tackled by eco-labeling to foster and force consumer behavior to bring them in the right direction, which is also relevant for companies. And the also quite neglected stage in many countries in the EU, the recycling and reuse stage, should be tackled by more measures which are really supporting recycling, recyclability, instead of incineration. And if incineration, then only those hazardous plastics or plastics which are not reusable anymore. To sum up, here are the main CleanSea messages I want to bring forward. And you can see innovation is one of the main topics we really have to focus. And we should support SMEs who are developing marine-friendly products. And maybe not plastic biodegradables, as we can learn from the last UNEP study. We have to put our legal principles in place and upscale the good practices we have to other regions. So just use the CleanSea report and create your own box of measures. Support collaboration between all levels of governance to support capacity building and information exchange. Integrate marine litter, mainstream existing legislation as maybe planned for the Water Framework Directive, and to integrate marine litter issues. So mainstream existing legislation and at the same time create new legislation focusing on prevention. So use bans and penalties. And last but not least, break existing patterns of behavior. There are lots of measures in place as well. They are also related to voluntary measures, awareness-raising campaigns, and my colleague Agni will now go more into detail.